Welcome to Showcase Chicago Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Reyes, a Chicagoland Realtor with ARE Partners. And in this podcast, we delve into the heart of all things Chicago, real estate, and life, as we engage in authentic conversations about some of the most significant decisions we make. In today's episode, I'm delighted to introduce you to Danny Salgado, a seasoned independent real estate investor and a valued past and current client. Danny Salgado brings a wealth of experience to the table, making him an ideal guest for our show. With a successful track record as a real estate investor, Danny's insights are invaluable for anyone interested in the industry. Danny, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
All right, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. We're going to just jump right in. I think the first thing I'd like to do is, how did we meet and how did we start our working relationship?
You were representing a seller.
Yes.
Yes, that's how we met, yes.
Yes, got a property in Cicero, Illinois. And that particular property, I obviously had the listing, and it was a property. I don't know how much you know about that deal, but I actually lost the contract on that property 3 times.
I remember something like that. Yeah, that's why I got a great deal off of it.
Well, my sellers are probably listening to this. Well, I mean, in that situation, though, my sellers were also buying. And so losing a contract on that property was significant because they weren't going to be able to buy the property we're already under contract with if they didn't get that property sold.
That's correct. I remember that.
In less than 4 or 5 days each time I got that property under contract. So thank you for buying it. We made that happen. Tell us about you and how you got started in real estate investing. Let's start from the beginning. How did you get into this?
Let's start. All right, well, it started about 20 years ago. I was a young, ambitious person. My first transaction was very low as far as the price. I think that property was only purchased for $80,000. I stuck maybe $10,000 into it, and 8 months later, I sold it for $180,000. So I was hooked.
Wow!
I was hooked off the first one.
But what were you doing career-wise before you got into this?
Nothing. My dad used to flip homes, and he let me in. I was 21, I believe, 20 or 21.
Got it.
He let me in because I had saved money. I was working at that time. I was in college. I was working at Home Depot. So I knew a little bit of it, the other side of the industry.
Yeah.
He let me in on the first one, and that's kind of how I took off. Well, we initially started doing together. So once the first flip was successful, I made my money, we split it, and then we got one together, and after, I would say about 10 of them, I kind of, he kind of started getting older, so I kind of ventured off on myself.
But always having his mentorship and his support in the process. But you wouldn't have gotten started had it not been that he kind of...
Probably not.
How many transactions did he do before you got into it?
If I remember correctly, I would say about 7 or 8. And I remember, it was sporadically because I used to be his free laborer in high school and in college.
Well, that's what you do, right? Yes. You get your kids to work for you for low cost or no cost.
Correct. No, that's true. And I hated it back then, but I appreciate it now because I learned everything.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you've really been investing since you were very young. I didn't realize that. So as much of this conversation is me learning about you as well, because I didn't know that information. And so you started doing that at 21, and then you did an $80,000 purchase, sold it for $180,000. You turned a profit, and then what type of investor are you? Are you mostly a fix and flip, or buy and hold, or what's your experience on that?
So throughout all these years, it's been fix and flip.
Okay.
Up until recently, and then we'll touch.
Yeah, we're going to touch base on that.
No, it's been fix and flip.
Always fix and flip.
Always fix and flip.
Yeah, and okay, so that's really interesting. I think that there's a lot of people out there who are like, how do I get started in becoming a fix and flip investor? Obviously, you had your father kind of giving you the support in the beginning, but in a new investor, how would you say they should get started in doing that kind of work? Or kind of that kind of investment, I would say. What would be your recommendation on that?
That's a great question. So I have a lot of friends that want to get into it. Obviously, if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. It does take time. It does take experience and, ups and downs. But what I would say, you don't need a lot of money to get started.
Okay. That's helpful. Yeah.
I've heard of programs for, new buyers, which if I were to do it all over again without knowing what I know, I would buy a 3-unit building as my primary home to get the lower interest rate as a homeowner, fix it up, rent the other 2 units, get passive income and live for free.
Yes, I actually talk to a lot of people who are like, oh, I want to buy a condo or a single family home. I'm like, well, your approval may not be as much because you're using it as your primary residence, which is a single unit. But if you buy a 2 or 3 flat, you can get those 3 or 5% down payments as an owner of occupied property, and then you get your first investment that way. You're renting it out, you're bringing income, and they use a portion of the rental income to approve for the mortgage, so you get approved for more.
Correct. So that's what I would definitely recommend. I tell my young cousins, start buying now and do it this way.
Yeah.
That way you don't need a lot. So let's say they buy a 3 unit. Even let's go say they go high, 400,000.
Yeah.
400 at 3%. All you need is $12,000. You know, that's not a lot of money. That's a part-time job for somebody young.
One thing I love about how quickly working with my investors, I love how quickly you guys crunch your numbers.
Yeah. Do the math. The quick, simple math. Numbers don't lie. Numbers do not lie.
That's the difference between when I work with my investor clients and working with like a first-time home buyer or just someone who's looking for their primary residence. Like investors, like they think it through pretty quickly. They crunch numbers in their head. Like let's make this happen.
Exactly. Location, and then I do the numbers. If the numbers work, and I know there's potential down the line to make a good profit, then it's an easy decision.
Yeah. Even when we bought, so I think this is a really good segue into when we worked together on your most recent purchase, which by the way, I was on vacation in Florida when I put that
deal. It happened. Yes. I remember that, yes.
So just so you know, whether I'm in Florida, at the beach, I'm going to be answering calls and making deals happen.
And he did, yes.
And I did. So I really love this story. So I'll set up the storyline. It was a 2-flat property next to Midway, and it was listed for $275.
Which was way below market value. Way below. It was intentionally priced low to attract buyers. Yeah. My thought is the realtor who listed it for them knew that they could bring, the market was pretty solid and hot during that time. So I believe she knew that by lowering it or going under market value, she would probably
generate a lot of activity.
The bidder over asking.
I also think that a reason why she priced it that way as well was because it was tenant occupied. And they were having challenges with the tenants.
Correct. Yes.
And so they wanted to make sure they get as many people because they were ultimately trying to sell the tenants with it.
Correct.
Yes. Right? Okay.
Yep.
So we found this 2-flat. He went to the open house. We're negotiating. Tell us about that deal overall.
I came to it was an open house. There was no appointments. It was an open house. I came to look at it, and there was literally at least 80 people waiting in line, like just a revolving door, waiting to go see it.
It's crazy.
For a second, I said, it's not even worth it. There's so many people, but I was with my dad who said, no, it's moving fast. Let's just take a peek at it. And I took a peek at it. It definitely had potential. I knew it wasn't going to go for $275. I knew that. And that's kind of when we're like, let's make an offer,
Yeah. You never know. And we did make an offer pretty quickly. We offered $305.
Correct.
Okay. And then I got back from Florida. I think the negotiations took a couple days, and I had came back and where I was in the dentist when I was negotiating the rest of this deal. And I actually told my dentist I have to take this call. And I got a call from the listing agent, and she was telling me she has multiple offers. Multiple. Obviously, with 80 people lined up, there's going to be multiple offers. And somewhere upwards of 10 to 12 offers, I think she said she had at the time.
Correct.
She did disclose to me that the highest offer at the time was $350. And our offer was $305. The biggest challenge, and back to what I was saying earlier, was that nobody wanted to accept the tenants for that property.
Correct.
And so ultimately, I was able to tell them, we discussed it, and I said, listen, it's a gamble. You never know how tenants are going to be. We obviously plan on a strategy and how you would work with those tenants if you took it, but it's still a huge bargain, right? From $350 to $305, great deal.
Yes, because I did the research on the location of the building. At the time, I think in its condition, which it wasn't a tear down, it needed some tender love and care. But at the time, I would have honestly, somebody would have paid about $425 for it, give or take, at the time. So
yeah, and so then we ended up, negotiating. We beat out all those other offers. We got it for $305. Again, highest at the time was $350, so $45,000 less than the highest bid. But you took the risk of taking on the tenants.
I was the only one that agreed.
The only one that agreed.
At closing, one of the ladies, I think it was I don't know if it was a realtor or the attorney said she ended up getting over 20 offers. Highest was 360 cash.
Oh, I didn't know.
Well.
You didn't tell me that.
Yeah, 360,000 cash. But nobody wanted to take the risk.
Yeah.
And I was a little hesitant because I never bought a property with tenant, and I knew to evict them or to get them ready to find another location was going to be hard. But
and then that's the challenge. That was our conversation. It was like, okay, so if we think about the numbers, if you have to go through the eviction process, and at the time you really couldn't evict people because of the COVID.
Correct. I even said even if it takes a year, it's still a good
calculated risk. Exactly. And I remember telling you too, like, you never know, you don't necessarily need to throw money at them, but start with conversating to try and get them out. So you ultimately purchased the property at 305, and then how did that tenant situation end up panning out for you?
So luckily I was a nice guy, as I am obviously, but I asked them that, if they were going to leave, and they said yes, they were looking, but they weren't very motivated to start looking. It was more of I'll start looking when I get the chance. But after the second month, I said, listen, if you guys can move out because I want to start working in the building. Luckily, they did what they had to do. They found places to live, which is great. I didn't have to evict them. I even helped. I offered to help them move out, moving trucks and all. But
did you end up actually hiring the moving trucks?
No, I offered, but they ended up moving out on their own accord, both of them at the same time, which was great.
And then one of the things we had thought about was maybe offering them $1,000 or $2,000 to move out, but you didn't have to do that.
I had thought about, maybe paying their first month's rent somewhere else, or their deposit. I would have done it, but like I said, luckily it worked out quicker than I anticipated.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and I remember saying very vividly, saying like, it's all how you talk to people. Whether it's tenants, that's even negotiating, right? It's not just the numbers, clearly. It's also who you're talking to, how you talk to people, the rapport you build with all parties involved. And in this situation, he ended up making a killing because he got these tenants out in less than 2 months. And what did you turn that property into?
So initially, it was a usual fix and flip.
Okay.
But as I was working on the property, I met a bunch of flight attendants that needed places to stay. So I ended up not selling it, keeping it, and now it's rented out to flight attendants. So
it's a buy and hold property for you. And is it your first buy and hold property?
No, it's not my first one.
Okay. Because you had the one in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's actually a crash pad. It's literally like 4 doors away from the airport in Midway.
Correct.
And it's really Goldmine. I'm not sure how much you want to disclose on the numbers, and you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable, but if you feel comfortable, feel free. But what would you say in terms of like the experience of finding flight attendants and how this whole thing has panned out for you?
So what I'd say is, as far as renting a conventional way, it's probably about 1.5 times more than what the market value would probably attract per unit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you currently have, so it's the first and second floor is a 2-flat, and it's a 3-bedroom unit, and then there's a basement unit as well. And so you have how many flight attendants in each unit?
So there's 12 flight attendants, but they're not there at the same time. They have the rotation, pretty much. They love it. I'm happy with them. They're clean. They're wonderful tenants, to be honest with you. I've had no major issues at all. And I'm providing them with somewhere to stay. And, I'm providing myself with a little bit of passive income.
Yeah, well, it's a great income on this particular property. We won't give numbers out here, but I'll just say that, let's just say he's doing really good on this one. And I'm glad that we got it for a great price. You took the tenant and it all worked out in your favor. And then, even though I didn't represent him in this sale,
it could have.
It should have panned out, but it didn't. However, we are currently recording this podcast episode in a similar property that was literally next door, and you just bought this property. Tell us about that experience, and what are you doing here?
So this one I purchased in, was it February
of this year, 2023,
and same exact thing. We're doing the whole gut remodel. For the most part, all new plumbing, electrical, HVAC systems. My intention now is to also convert it into
a crash pad
for the flight attendants who
Yeah. Absolutely. And like, again, this particular block has turned into such a great, great for you.
Yes.
I mean, it's just like the building I showed you, then this one, it's like the exact same floor plan. Now he has 2 crash pads next to Midway, and he'll ultimately hold on to these as a part of his portfolio. And then hopefully we'll buy something else together soon.
Yes. It was a owner-to-owner transaction.
It was an off-market transaction.
It was off-market transaction.
Yeah, it was off-market.
So, had it not been, Michael would have been my guy. He's
I
the best.
appreciate that. I mean, it's literally next door, so it's fine. It happens. it is what it is. So, no, I'm glad. I'm happy for you. At the end of the day, I know that there's other deals we put together here, and we're going to work together, and it's going to be great.
Definitely.
Congratulations on this, too.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about some of like the challenges you've faced as an investor and how you overcame them. What were some of like the biggest significant challenges you had, maybe starting out versus now, and how did you overcome them?
And I don't know. There's always challenges up until now, and the thing is, through the experience, 20 years, I've learned to adapt, and now anything that comes my way, it's easily handled.
Okay.
As opposed to starting at the beginning. Say the plumbing is a big issue before. Money, starting off, money was a little tighter.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't as easy to fix something as opposed to now where, let's get it squared away, fix it, brand new, move on.
Absolutely. And when someone is starting to do a fix and flip, what would you allocate? Like, I don't know if you how you budget for these things, that you do a 20% reserve or anything like that, or maybe for someone starting out, how would you recommend they budget for the project?
Oh, that's a great question. So the way I would recommend it's probably not the way I do it, but the way I would probably recommend somebody starting off is, always make have a budget, but assume you're going to go over it. Unfortunately, it just seems that's what always happens. I don't care if it's 20 or 100,000. It never seems that you can keep it at or under. So I would say don't overspend on the location as far as the neighborhood, what the comps would go. So know that you buy a $200,000 home, you stick $50,000 home, it's going to be worth at least $350 to make it worth your while. So that's what definitely would be important.
And then would you say it's like if you're doing a $100,000 renovation, you put a 10% reserve, a 20% reserve, or you just kind of wing it and see how?
I personally just wing it.
Okay.
But yeah, I would say about a 20% reserve would be great just to have,
And for me, I love Excel spreadsheets, and so I'm all about putting things on a spreadsheet and like, okay, we're going to put a 20% reserve and really look at the numbers. But it's also, I'm a very data-driven broker, so even when we've made offers and like he's a seasoned investor and he knows the neighborhood he's buying in, I always still pull comps.
Yes.
And I send you, okay, here are the active comps, here's what's closed, and just so that we all have a clear picture on what's happening in the market. So I know that you use. Actually, I just told this to someone in an email. How much of it is luck and how much of it is strategy as an investor?
Luck has a lot to do with it as well. Yes, if you can get lucky and get it off market, or get it before anybody,
I don't support off market deals. By the way,
not always. But I'm saying if it does. Try to get it as low as possible. Whether you get it off market, on market, just try to get it as fast and as low as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That way you're not competing with.
And I'm totally joking about not liking off market. I actually have done a lot of off market transactions, and I found the sellers, and I have a particular buyer. In most cases, when I have a particular buyer who's looking for something very specific, and then what I do is I engage the seller directly, and then I negotiate my commission.
Oh, which is great. Okay.
So it's if I find a for sale by owner or something completely off market for a particular buyer that I'm not fibbing that I don't have a buyer. If I have a buyer, I'm going to find a property for them. So that's how we can work those deals to see. What educational avenues or like books or seminars, or is there any like knowledge-based things you would recommend for people who are just starting out in this?
Good question. I personally wasn't a big book reader as far as that. It was kind of more trial and error.
Okay.
I had a little advantage because my dad had gone through it a little bit more. So, I learned from him what to do or what not to do. Kind of learned from his mistakes initially, and then kind of learned from my own mistakes as well.
I mean, here's the thing about that. It's like hard knock lives teach you the best lessons. They're never going to teach you all the things they could teach you in school. It's learning in real world situations. However, to that breath, I will also say one of my favorite investor avenues is Bigger Pockets. I'm not sure if you've ever
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of it.
They have a great website, a ton of resources for buy and hold as well as flip resources, tons of spreadsheets, books, podcasts. I mean, you name it. There's so much knowledge that I recommend. So if anyone's looking for a good resource for investing and how to get started, Bigger Pockets is a really great resource. When finding good help, how do you go about finding good contractors? How do you vet them? What's your process for finding good support?
Okay. Well, for the most part, all the people that work for me have been working with me for quite a year. So the way I do it is I have two sets, for the most part, at least two sets of plumbers, two sets of electricians, two sets of HVAC guys, because sometimes they're busy. So, and obviously they have different prices. They get different quotes, So I like to have at least two, if not more, if you can have three, but for the most part, I have two trusted of everything.
Okay.
And we have been working together for years now. So it's kind of, they know what they're doing. I know the type of work they do. I know that they do great work. For the most part, I don't want to call myself a general contractor per se. I'm more of a project manager at this point.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
I'm kind of more running it behind the scenes, or not even behind the scenes, but as opposed to me doing 80% of the work like I used to. Now I'm kind of doing maybe 10 to 20% of the work. Not because, time. It's the time.
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, the busier you are, the longer you've been doing something, that you're going to need to, branch out and have people support you in that.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct. I mean, I'll get my hands dirty still, and I still do, but it's not as much as I used to because it just moves quicker with having, more people with,
We're also getting older and our bodies are.
I'm lazier, right?
I wouldn't call that lazy. I think you're being smarter with your energy.
There you go.
There's no need to disperse as much energy anymore when you can hire someone half your age and you can do those things. I think also, it's great to have those 2 and 3 people in your back pocket, but you have to start with, taking a risk at some point, right? And maybe, vetting them or going to see some of their current their past projects or calling some of their past clients to get a good reference and see if maybe that's a good avenue I would recommend for someone just maybe looking for a contractor now.
Well, that's a good point for that is as a new investor, as a new buyer, you have to kind of have a general idea of what it would cost to fix whatever it is.
Okay.
And obviously nowadays it's easy to, find what the square footage to paint a house is online. So you have to know because the prices will come in from as low to as high. And there has to be, a medium.
I agree with that. It's funny. I was just having a conversation with someone who was looking at a property that was, they did a $90,000 renovation in a 1,200 square foot condo.
Wow.
And
yeah.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money for a 1,200 square foot condo.
Yeah, and I was telling this, so this is a particular new investor client of mine who no longer lives in the city of Chicago, but they were looking at this property like, wow, they spent $90,000 and they're only getting this much profit at the end of this. And I told them in this email that person was probably renovating it to their liking and not as an investor.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Looking and crunching the numbers and shopping around and getting the best price. And making sure you're doing it for resale, right?
Correct.
They're spending $90,000. I told them in the email, you probably could have spent $40,000.
Yeah, $90,000. That's a good amount for that
for
amount of space.
Yeah, it was. And I want to say it was only a 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it wasn't the West Loop, but still overspent, no question. So that actually leads me to a good question to ask, which is sourcing materials. And obviously weighing high end versus, mid-grade, mid-range, how do you balance that out in terms of finishes?
So me personally, when I first started, it was whatever was cheapest. I've completely gone away from that. So,
that's good.
Now it's minimum medium to higher end, but again, you have to know how high to go as far as the high end, but at least, medium range material. You don't want to go cheap. You do not want to go cheap. I always tell people it's going to cost you the same amount of money for labor to do a bathroom. You might save a couple $100 on the material, but the labor will be the same. So why not just spend a little bit more for quality?
And it's going to last too long.
It's going to last longer. Exactly.
and then you're not having to redo it in 5 years versus 10 years or 20 years, whatever it's going to be.
Exactly.
The longevity of it. That's a really good question. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually really good. You know, and I always tell people who are doing, you know, clients that are looking to do a bathroom, like really shop around, get at least 3 quotes, especially if you're not as seasoned like an investor. You know, ask your realtor who are their connections, right? I have a lot of good contractors I work with, obviously good investors and people who do flips and flips all the time. So I have a question for you that's kind of, you know, for me anyways, but what is it about working with me that made you want to continue working with me?
Honestly, for me, your character, your personality, 100% here. But along with that, I love that you drop, it seems, you might not do it, but I feel like you drop everything for me. I mean, you're there. When I call, if you can't answer, you will call me back as soon as possible. So that's how we've gotten deals.
Mm-hmm.
We're the first ones to get the offering or something, but for me, that's what it was, honestly.
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And that's one thing, like, you know, you can always answer a call. I have people that I can work with. If I can't do a showing in person, I will send someone for me. If I'm on vacation in Florida and there's an open house, I'm going to write out that offer from the beach.
How many times have I called you that same day, within hours, we've seen a property?
Always,
which
absolutely.
I love, because I've worked with other people in the past, and I get it. Everybody's busy.
We're all busy.
But, you know, you lose deals that way.
Yes.
Time. So that is honestly one of the best things about you.
Yeah. And that's good. And I always want my clients to feel like they're my only client.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's certainly something that I am very proactive about. My response time is something I work significantly for. I always like to be 10 minutes early. Like, those are the things that I feel like are the foundation of my business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody I know that's young, I just say start with real estate. Start buying as soon as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So, because the market will go up and down, but it's like a roller coaster. But eventually, it's going to go higher than lower.
Yeah.
So
and that's actually a great question to segue into what's happening in the market right now, where sellers aren't selling because they've locked in these rates at 3 and 4%.
Yep.
We still have a ton of buyers, and we're still in multiple offer situations, you know, but we have no inventory.
That's what it is.
You know what I mean? So it's a really challenge. And so, you know, markets come up and down, and how, you know, to ride those waves and understand that it's the long term, right? At least, is that your perception? That
you have to ride it out and not get scared. And long term, whether it takes in 2008, when it took a good at least 7 years, give or take, maybe more. If you know, people lost money, I get it, but if you wrote it out and just hung tight, you were going to come out. You came out on top. You did. And
you got to change with the market, right? Obviously, your investment decisions would have been different 2008 versus now. But at the same time, if you were on the upper hand, you were able to buy a ton of properties in 2000.
I wish I had way more money back then than now, because I would have scooped up as much as I could back then.
Yeah. But also knowing, like, you just found this property off market, so knowing how to still find the opportunities.
Yes.
Right? And it's still a gold mine, right? I think the long term, I think most people say that real estate's a sure bet, you know what I mean? Especially the long term. So start young, buy as much. Do you invest in stocks or anything like that?
I do. I do invest in stocks. That's kind of a roller coaster as well. But, you know, stocks are not a bad investment long term. I think you just gotta, you know, safe and steady wins the race.
So when you set up your corporation, like, do you pay yourself a dividends, or it's just kind of like, do you give yourself a salary?
I have to give myself a salary because it's an LLC, but my attorney files it also as an S corp. So I do have to pay myself a salary.
Okay.
I can pay myself as much as I want or as little as I want. So
well, then you have to pay taxes on it.
Either way, yeah, exactly. But no, it's what do you call it? A tax.
The write-offs
and all that. Yeah.
All the tax benefits and stuff. Are you also paying yourself like insurance and Social Security and all those things as well?
Yep.
Okay. So you really have it all set up, and that's actually really great too, because it's a business.
It is a business.
It's truly a business, and this is all you do, right? Is investing. And
pretty much, I also do remodel jobs for other people, so I do take on other projects.
Okay.
So the way I do it is, when I don't have properties that I'm currently working on, whether I'm waiting for closing, whether I'm waiting to find a house, I'll do work. I like big projects for other people, so I do it.
All right. So if you're looking for a contractor and he's available, do you have a website or?
I don't have a website, but I'm sure you can share my
Yes, contact me. You could actually look at the show notes, and I'll have links below for anything we can share.
And we can give you a couple of avenues of all the work I've done for my own properties and for other people. And honestly, I've never had a dissatisfied customer or client, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, you've been doing this since you're 21. I'm not sure how old you are. You don't have to say. However, I mean, I've seen your work, and you do things with integrity. You do things well. And so if you're looking for a good contractor, you know, Danny Salgado right here, and just reach out to me or, you know, click on the show notes and I can set you guys up.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this has been amazing. Thank you so much for being a part of the Showcase Chicago podcast. This is great. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Showcase Chicago podcast. If I can support you with your real estate needs, you can search Showcase Chicago or Michael Reyes on all social media platforms or go to www.showcase-chicago.com. Until next time, continue to live your best life. I'm Michael Reyes with ARE Partners. Thanks for listening.